All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Verdict. I'm Spray and Pray 1000, and today we are going to talk about Astrobot. So, Astrobot is a platformer for the PlayStation 5 made by Team Asobi. Pretty much, there's a lot to talk about here, but most of it is just in regards to the quality that Astrobot brings. Astrobot, like I said, is a platformer game. It's very simplistic, which is, I think, what makes it very charming. It's definitely made as a throwback to the simpler era of games where platforming was just more straightforward. It was the kind of game you could find on almost any console, usually almost always appealing to children or to teens, right? And I think that what Astrobot really wants to do is it really wants to harken back to those good old days, right? To the glory of just simplistic platformer collectathons that really made a lot of these consoles grow and put them on the market, especially, with regards to Astrobot, the PlayStation 1. So, undoubtedly at this point, since this game is about a month or so old, you've definitely seen, the clips and everything of Astrobot having a lot of reference characters. And that's primarily one of the biggest things about this game, is that there are a variety of collectibles to get. Now, most platformers have a lot of collectibles to grab, usually some kind of money, or, something related to the characters, or something to collect, right? So in Mario, you have stars, right? In Jak and Daxter, you have the egg things. I can't remember, sorry, it's very early. I think it's just Eco. In Ratchet and Clank, you have the bolts, right? In Sly, you have coins again, right? There's always some amount of, different things to grab and find. Sonic, you have rings. In Astrobot, you do the same thing. You collect PlayStation coins, right? But also, one of the major collectibles of the game is to find all of Astrobot's missing friends. So that's where all the throwback characters come in. There's about 300 Astrobot friends to find throughout the game. Each one of those 300 Astrobots is uniquely found in a level. Sometimes, I would say maybe about 40, maybe 50% of the Astrobots in the game are reference characters. They're throwbacks to older games that have appeared on the PlayStation console. So, for example, early on, you'll find Crash Bandicoot, an Astrobot dressed up like Crash Bandicoot. You'll find Jak and Daxter. You'll find Ratchet. You'll find Sly. You'll find Chris Redfield. There's all kinds of throwback characters. I don't want to spoil too many of them that I think are really cool. It's sort of like a cool, way to take praise and to pay respects to the legacy of PlayStation, which at this point has been going for 30 years. And it's actually really cool to see them, have a game that references most of them. Now, at the time of me making this, I believe the DLC might be out. I haven't looked. I know they announced that there was going to be DLC. I'm sure it'll be more of the same. They added some stuff, I think, for Stellar Blade and some other games that came out more recently that probably didn't make the cut. But to my knowledge, most of the major PlayStation franchises are represented here. I think the only ones that might not be are like Twisted Metal and, what was the other one? Twisted Metal and maybe Resistance, but I don't really know any characters from Resistance, so it could be that I just didn't recognize any. But there's a lot of throwbacks here, which I think is cool. They have a game that is, a game in its own right, but also it pays a lot of respects to what Sony's done and accomplished over the last 30 years. So like him or hate him, it's something that I feel like does deserve respect and it is pretty cool. Now, as I said, Astrobot is a game in its own right. So it's meant to be a simple platformer. There are some challenging moments, but you're not going to reach, like, for example, the difficulty of like a Devil May Cry or a Soulsborne game. This is going to be a very straightforward collectathon. You navigate Astrobot around these very nice looking 3D worlds. You collect all these different parts. There's about 4 major levels in each world, plus some bonus side levels, plus some side challenges. And then at the end of each major world, each galaxy, you fight a big boss. Throughout each one of these levels and each boss fight, you get a power-up. So, for example, one power-up lets you get Extendo Fist that you could use to punch. Another power-up is a rocket disguised as a chicken that lets you rocket up in the air. Another power-up is a big dog that lets you boost forward. Another power-up is Time Slow. There's Invincible Ball Mode. There's all kinds of different power-ups that you're going to use to help you navigate around the world and to help Astrobot find all of his friends. And so right off the bat, the game has a variety of gameplay because each level tries to be unique. Each level is a different theme, right? Sometimes you have, like, for example, a Japanese, like, bath and resort, right? Hot springs level. and then on the other hand, you'll be zipping across skyscrapers with breaking glass floors and things like that. And then even in some other levels, there might just be like a nice beach that you're traveling along and you know, fighting like different enemies and stuff. Now, as with most platformers, the story is pretty straightforward. Astrobot and his friends are soaring along on the PlayStation 5 ship that they call home, when a big evil green alien shows up, scatters all of his friends, and tries to steal the CPU of the PS5 for himself, in the process wrecking the PlayStation 5 and causing it to crash land on a desert planet. So now it's up to you as Astrobot to recover all of your friends, recover all the parts of the PlayStation 5, and then recover and save everybody, right? You have to go back and there's also some other things as well. Like, but the story is very straightforward, right? It's let's find our friends, let's repair the PS5, let's defeat the big alien, okay? Doesn't have to be anything more than that. I think that what Astrobot succeeds in, like I said, is its simplicity. I think it's got a lot of good platforming moments. Now, Astrobot only has 1 life point, except in boss fights, they give you 2 extra life points. The checkpoints are fairly frequent, so it's not like it's a big deal that you only have 1 life point, but it is worth noting that Astrobot can only really take 1 hit, and then he dies. Now, some enemies, they don't directly hit you, they push you, but most enemies will just insta-kill you, which is fine, I think. I think that that's a good way to keep the challenge up, while not just making it so that the game is, you know, most games where you have insta-kill, sometimes it's a little bit annoying. I wouldn't say so much in this game. I felt like pretty much most things were pretty fair, right? So I don't really hate that at all. And in the boss fights, they give you multiple hit points, which is cool. The way each one of these areas goes, like I said, is that you have 4 levels that you jump through, you platform through, you find your missing friends. Some Astrobots are generic, some Astrobots are not, right? And they're unique. And I definitely like that after you beat the boss, you get a themed level around whoever you rescue. So, for example, one of the themed levels involves using Kratos and saving Kratos, you know, his God of War 2018 rendition. Let's not get too crazy here, right? And while it is based off Ragnarok, you know, it's not like a spoiler for the game. It just has a couple of themed characters from God of War Ragnarok and God of War 2018. So, and I think that makes it really interesting. I think that makes it really cool. So, for example, if you want to run around and you want to play, you know, Astrobot, here's this level that plays like God of War. You have the axe, right? You could throw it to freeze things. It's actually part of the puzzle. Another level has you shooting enemies with gunplay. Another level has you using a bow and arrow. And I'm not going to go too far in spoiling which level's which. But like I said, there's a couple of franchises I think that weren't represented. There's a couple that were, which I think was kind of cool and I didn't expect. So, I mean, that would be my one, like, ephemeral criticism, right? If I had to give it a little bit of that, would be whatever games that they missed that were big, I hope that they put in. It seems like there was enough of a lot of things, but there's a lot of generic Astrobots. Some of them, there's like 1 or 2 ones that are unique, but not tied to a game. For example, one had mushrooms on his head because you find him in a cave. But I feel like it's not that they need less collectibles, and I know that they went out of their way probably to secure the rights to do this. I just wish that there were more of these. I think that's kind of cool. Now, what you can do with a lot of these characters is you can go back to the home world, the crash site, and you can see these characters. You could buy them items, and you could see them like acting out like famous scenes from their games and stuff, right? So, for example, the Jill Valentine Astrobot, you could see like, you know, handling keys and stuff, which is a throwback to Resident Evil 1, where most of the early game at least, is you trying to fumble around and find different keys, and she's the master of unlocking. You know, it's all sort of references like that. And I get it. I understand that, like, saying, oh, well, this game just feels like a graveyard. It feels just like a member berries game. Maybe I would agree with that if the game didn't have a nice core gameplay loop. I think that the basic loop of a platformer still works today. Now, the only thing that I will maybe agree with some people on is, do you want to pay $60 for a platformer in 2024? If you don't think a platformer is worth $60 in 2024, I might disagree with you, but I understand what you're saying. I think that this game does a lot of good things, right? It's got very interesting level design. It's got good power-ups and gameplay. It's got a nice, simple collectathon. You know, it's not over-convoluted and things like that. It's got really good graphics. It performs really well. It's got like everything you would need. And in my opinion, is one of the best games so far in the PS5. Now, that said, it is the type of game that, yes, you could probably go buy and play from something else for cheaper. But, I mean, this is an Astrobot review, not a review of the genre as a whole. I think that Astrobot does exactly what it needs to do to stand out as a platformer, and I very much like it. Now, like I said, I wish there were more references, right? If you're going to lean into that, lean all the way. They did it like, I want to say 80% of what I think they could have, which is cool. And I would say maybe add a few more levels. I know I didn't feel like I got skimped, but I do think that going above and beyond would have been to add a couple more levels. They do have playable credits, which is something rare. And that's what I mean. Like, Team Asobi knows how to pick them, right? They know how it feels like this is a team of people who have played video games before. So, like, most video games, when you beat them, they just dump you on a credit screen and they just roll the fucking credits. And then it's like a movie, right? Like, it's almost like, all right, let me go get up and let me get out of here. Let me go home, right? Like, it's not that you don't have respect for the people on it, but I think credits, when they're interactive, you know, you encourage the player to stick around and sit through the credits. You know what I mean? I think that's something with Smash Bros, for example, had perfectly. Bayonetta does this as well, even though I don't like that they put it over the center of the screen and they make you fight over it. But, you know, it's something I think that's really cool. Being able to sit down and look at a game and say, yes, this is what I want to see. You know, I want to, there's a reason to stick around in the credits. It's one of those little things, you know, and I like it. I very much like when there's a reason to stick around, right? It feels like at no point did they ever want this to stop feeling like a video game, you know? And I think that's what Team Asobi really does. They really captured the feeling, the essence of what makes a game really good. And it could be as simple as just the way the levels are designed. You know, they have cool collectibles hidden. If you miss a collectible in a level, you know, if you beat the level and come back, there's a bird that you could pay 200 coins for that you can then use to find all the secrets in the level, right? When you get close, it'll start beeping, which I think is cool. It reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima, where, like, if you complete an area or if you get certain items, these items allow you to figure out where the remaining collectibles are. I don't mind stuff like this, you know, whether you want to say, oh, wait for the end of the game. I think that in a game like Astrobot, it makes more sense to have it be available after you beat the level. Whereas in a game like Ghost of Tsushima, I could argue that it's probably better for you after you beat the game. I don't mind when you have stuff like this, especially in big levels like this and open worlds and stuff like that. I think that's actually a pretty good idea. I know I don't talk about this very often, but even the earliest games I liked was like Spyro the Dragon 2 lets you find out where all the missing gems are. Spyro 1 does not do that. But to be fair, in Spyro 2 it was a cheat code. And you could do it at any point, but it was a cheat code. But Spyro 3, it's an unlockable ability, which I think is fine. Yes, I'm a Spyro boy, okay? And he is in this game, and I actually do like that. If only they would make more Spyro games, right? If only they would remake the GBA games, right? Yeah, maybe before I die, I guess. But ultimately, Astrobot is a very fun experience. Now, it might be a little bit expensive, but it is fun. I don't think that if you're looking for a platformer, I don't think you could go wrong with Astrobot, because I think Astrobot does what it needs to do with ruthless but calculated efficiency. So ultimately, what would I give Astrobot? I think that the biggest hurdle that Astrobot faces is something that's genre-wide. It's trying to sell itself in an industry of mass titans, where for $60 you could get games, even some of the ones depicted in this game, like God of War Ragnarok or Horizon Forbidden West. Some of these games you could get at this point for $60 or less. And I think that's ultimately like the one thing that goes against it, is that you could make an argument that like there are longer games that are more in-depth. I don't think that just because a game is made for kids that makes it less worth it. In fact, I think some of the games made for teens are actually better than games that are made for M. But Astrobot has to struggle with trying to prove its worth in a genre, in a gaming industry where platformers are not only seen as kiddie, but also just looked down upon as being not worth the money. And if there was ever really a platformer worth $60, I play a lot of platformers on this channel, right? It's actually kind of funny how the genre has made a resurgence. But normally that they're just Nintendo games. So I feel that this game is worth $60. It has a lot of good content. It performs well. It looks good. And the story and the main campaign is pretty long, right? It's pretty decent for a platformer. Now, that said, I understand why people feel that way. But I think that's the biggest hurdle it faces, and the way that they could rectify it was to maybe add some more levels. Maybe, I don't know if they need to have one more full story nebula, but I feel like if they added maybe just another set of like bonus worlds or something that had nothing to do with the already in the game bonus worlds, maybe the game would have a little more staying power. Maybe I would be able to mount that argument a little bit better. I don't see this as a bad thing necessarily, but I understand like how people feel about this. Otherwise, though, this is definitely one of the more solid bangers that Sony's put out, and definitely one of the better games of the year just because of that. Now, I also like that they focused almost exclusively on the single-player aspect. I don't think there's any multiplayer, which is something you see in a lot of platformers like the Lego games and whatnot. So I'm actually very, very glad for that as well. So I think that a 91 out of 100 gives a good idea of how good this is. It was very fun. It was very fulfilling. I really enjoyed it. And I think that it will be a good addition to anyone's PlayStation library because it's just a very fun, simple game. And I think that's something that doesn't get taken into account enough, is that the game is just fun. The game just has a lot of good stuff. You could tell it's very cheerful. It's got a lot of very good moments. It's got humor. It knows what it wants to do. It knows that people want to see, you know, really nice looking vistas and stuff like that. It reminds me, and again, to be a little nostalgic, and then we'll get out of here. It reminds me of when I was a kid playing the original Spyro the Dragon and playing especially Spyro 2. You know, you get to some of these overworlds where it's just chill and relax, and you just kind of, you know, you're just tired. It's like, there's something about, like, for Spyro 2, for real, with, like, Winter Tundra and Autumn Plains, that's just relaxing. You know, like, Ripto is apparently trying to take over Avalar, and you're just sitting here relaxing. You know, it's just, it's nice. It's got a good blend of that, and I feel that this game does try to channel that a little bit more. You know, this is a little more upbeat. I think Spyro, you could almost argue, is kind of lo-fi, but whatever. And obviously Crash is actiony, and obviously the first game is a completely different vibe for those two. But like I said, this is not a Spyro review. I like platformers. I hope that they keep making more of this. Knowing Sony, they'll probably take all of this money they make and throw it into another Concord or throw it into another failure of a project. So, at least for what it's worth, Team Asobi put in extra work, and I mean, credit where credit is due, right? Sony helped them, whatever they did, deliver another banger. And I think that this is a very good game, well worth the time and the money, regardless of the references and, you know, how you feel about the franchises that are contained within, if they're around, not around, or still, or around still or not. They did a very good job with it. So I think that alone deserves credit, right? We're going to base it off of what's on the game, and what's on the game is pretty good. Anyway, that's all the time we have. I will see you on the next one.